Okay, so in this video, we are going to talk about two things. On the first page, we're going to find the arc length of a circle. And then on the back side of this, we're going to talk about how to find the area of a sector. So with the arc length of a circle, now what that is part of the circumference. So the circumference is going to be all the way around this circle. And then when I'm finding the arc length, I'm only finding from this part of the circle. So I'm only finding the distance around this portion of the circle. So there's going to be two ways that we can solve this. One way we can use a formula and just plug in the numbers and go. And then the other way is going to be to set up a proportion, which is very similar to just plugging in the numbers to solve for this distance right here. Now, one thing that we know is that the entire distance all the way around is the circumference. That is the 2 pi r. So to find the distance all the way around is 2 pi r. Now also, how many degrees are in a circle, all the way around a circle? We know that's 360 degrees. And so what we're going to do is we're going to compare the total number in the circle to how many degrees are in the circle, or also known as theta. How many degrees is that arc length? And then over here is going to be, what is my arc length? So this is going to be one way to help us figure this out. So I'm just going to plug in these numbers. So arc length is what I'm searching for. That's going to get an x. Now 2 pi r, so in this case my radius is 16, so 2 times pi times 16. And that is equivalent to theta is 82 degrees over 360. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cross multiply for my proportions. So in my calculator right here, well, first of all, I know 360 times x is 360x. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply 2 times pi times 16 times 82 in my calculator. So 2 times pi, which pi is right up here, so I'm going to hit second in this button, times 16. And then I'm going to cross multiply it, so times 82. And so I get this huge long number right here, 8,243, and then I'm going to round to 3 decimal places, 539. Then to get x by itself, I'm going to go ahead and divide by 360 on both sides. And I get x equals, and I'll go ahead and divide by 360, 22.899. So I had to round on that last 9. So what this is the distance from there over to there. And this is in inches, so make sure that you put your units about almost 23 inches right there. Now, so this is one way I'll let you solve for these. The other way is to use the formula for the arc length. And so our formula here. So arc length is equal to theta, my degrees in the circle, pi over 180 times the radius. So I've multiplied these by. So I'm going to plug in theta, which is 82 degrees, times pi over 180 times my radius, which is 16. Okay, so in my calculator, I'm going to do 82 times, now since this is a fraction, I'll do parentheses, pi divided by 180, close parentheses, times it by 16. And you should get the same thing as before, so about almost 23, so 22.899. And that is inches on this first one. So I do not care if you like to set it up this way or if you like to set it up this way. So this one you're doing the same thing, plugging in the degrees, plugging in the radius. Plugging in the degrees, plugging it in the radius. It's, do you like to type it in like this, or do you like to cross multiply? This way makes a little bit more sense to me, but this way is faster. So let's try this method on the next one. So the degrees is 238 degrees, so I'm solving from here all the way around there. So I'm figuring out what is this distance. So I have theta times pi over 180 times my radius. So 238 times pi over 180 times my radius of 87 milliliters, or I'm sorry, millimeters. And let's go ahead and type this in our calculator. So 238 times, in parentheses, pi divided by 180, close parentheses, times 87. We get 361.8, or I'm sorry, 0.388. I'll round that up. And this is in millimeters, so make sure you add your millimeters on the end of that. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and complete the practice. Okay, so on this practice, make sure that you got about 19.548, and don't forget your inches on this one. Okay, so over on the back, it's talking about area of a sector. So a sector is actually going to be the part of the area. So not the full area, but part of it. So we can set this up with a proportion that's very similar. So I know that there are 360 degrees in a full circle. And then we're going to use theta to represent what degrees of that proportion it is. And then the entire area of a circle is going to go down here. So last time we did circumference because we were talking about arc length. This time because of the sector, we're talking about area. The total area is right here, pi r squared. And in parentheses underneath that, let's write area to remind us. And then up here is going to be my sector. How big my sector is. So sector is what we're finding out. So that's going to be my x, pi r squared. So that's pi times 16 squared. Equals theta is 82 degrees over 360. So let's cross multiply on this. 360 times x is 360x. And then on the other side, I'm going to do pi times 16 squared times 82. So, and don't forget the squared on 16. Okay, so let's write that down. It's about 66,000. 65,948.31, and we'll go ahead and round that up, 313. Next, I'm going to divide this by 360. I get x equals, divided by 360, 183.1. Now this gets tricky here. So I looked at the fourth digit. This is a 7, so I round up. That means this 9 is going to turn into a 10. So it's going to be 190 on that rounding. And now this time we're dealing with inches, but because we're doing an area right here, there's going to be inches squared. So area gets inches squared. So if you like this proportion way, use the proportions. The other way you can do this is by plugging it straight into a formula where my area equals theta over 360 times pi r squared. Notice how these are all very similar. So my theta again is 82. So 82 over 360 times pi times radius squared, 16 squared. And I'm just going to type this whole thing into my calculator. So my fraction, so parentheses 82 divided by 360, times it by pi, times it by 16 squared. Okay, 183, same as before. Remember, you should be getting the same answers. So 183.190 because of rounding, inches squared because we are dealing with area. So let's use this formula for the next one. So I'm finding the area of this entire portion right here. So theta over 360 times pi r squared. So my theta is 238 divided by 360 times pi r squared, my radius is 87, so 87 squared. And again, I can type this whole thing into my calculator, just make sure that you're using the correct parentheses. 238 divided by 360 times pi times 87 squared. So we get 15,720.373. We'll round up. This one is in millimeters, so it is millimeters squared. Okay, again, go ahead and pause the video. Go ahead and solve this next one on your own. Make sure that you're doing it correctly so that way you can check yourself, catch any mistakes before you get to your own practice. Okay, on this last one you should get, we're rounding here, so about 97.738. Make sure that you've rounded correctly and you have your units. It is in inches squared. I want to make sure that you have the work on that. When I say show your work, I at least need to see these 2 steps, and it would be great if you started writing this down for memorization, so you've got your 3 steps. Okay, so go ahead and flip this over and get working on these problems. If you need more space to show your work, grab a separate piece of paper and staple it onto the back and show your work on another page.